Okay, I want to go through those members who are present for the Social Work Resources Committee of 2nd of June 2021. Councillors I have present are John Bradley. I don't have Walter Brogan. Is Councillor Brogan in the meeting? I don't have Councillor Brogan. Councillor Brown's in the meeting. Councillor Buchanan's in the meeting. Councillor Calicut. Councillor Campbell. Councillor Chalmers. I've got Councillor Cowie, Councillor Devlin. Is Councillor Donnelly in the meeting? Yeah, I've got Councillor Donnelly in the meeting. Councillor Hawkins present, Councillor Holford's present, Councillor Horsham, Councillor Loudon, Councillor Lowe. Don't have Councillor Lowe in the meeting. Councillor McClymont's present, Councillor McDonald. Let me see, Councillor McGavigan. Don't have Councillor McGavigan. Councillor McGuigan present. Councillor Nayland present. I don't have Councillor Nelson. Councillor Nelson? No.
Apologies from Councillor Nelson.
Thank you. Councillor Nugent? I don't have Councillor. Oh, thanks, Councillor Nugent. Councillor Ross is not present. Councillor Walker?
Here.
Thanks, Councillor Walker. And Councillor Watson is present. I'll hand back to the Chair. Thank you.
Sorry, I am here. I didn't get in quick enough. It's Colin McGavigan.
Thanks, Councillor McGavigan.
Tracy, Councillor Carmichael, you forgot me. I'm here as well.
Sorry, Councillor Carmichael. I've got you marked present. Sorry.
Anybody else?
I think that's everyone.
Everyone. Thanks, Tracy. Before we start, can we make sure our microphones are on mute to prevent feedback unless you're speaking? Item 1 is any declaration of interest? No. Item 2 is the minutes of the previous meeting on the 17th of March. Is that a true and accurate reflection? Can we agree the minutes?
Agreed.
Thank you. Moving on to item 3 is the revenue budget monitoring form for the period April 1st, 2020 to 26th of February 2021, pages 17 to 26. And Hazel will take us through this. Hazel Goodwin.
Thank you, Chair. The purpose of this report is to provide information on actual expenditure against our budget for the social work resources for the period 1st of April 2020 to 26th of February 2021. That's our financial period 12, and also to give you a forecast for the year end to 31st of March 2021. This is now the 5th report we've brought for this current financial year. At section 5 of the report, we note there that following our formal probable outturn exercise, we were forecasting an overspend of 0.379 million against the annual budget. And that was relating to the additional cost of COVID-19 and those budget elements that were not delegated to the IGIB and therefore not funded by the Scottish Government via the mobilisation plan. So you remember that those costs were being considered as part of the overall council probable outturn position. As at the 26th of February then, we did have an overspend position of 0.309 million against that phased budget. Just reminding you there about the additional COVID-19 costs incurred for adults and older people social care. Those are the services devolved to the Integrated Joint Board. We include those in the mobilisation plan, and the Scottish Government uses that to allocate funds to health and social care partnerships. And the types of things in there are expenditure on additional beds to facilitate discharge from hospital, support for carers, personal protective equipment and some staff overtime. So as at the 26th of February, those additional costs and also the corresponding income that we did receive from Scottish Government, that totalled 16.444 million, and you'll see that in Appendix B. Now, as well as those additional costs, social work resources have lost income from services that are not being provided during the emergency, and also there's some non-achievement of savings that we had proposed for 2021. So the value of those two elements is 1.4 million as at the 26th of February. That's included within Appendix D. So just looking at the total cost there, we need to take those two figures together. So that gives additional cost to the council of 17.844 million. That includes accrued costs that we know we were going to incur, but we hadn't actually spent at that point. In terms of getting the funding in from the Scottish Government, so as at the 26th of February, the date of the report, we'd already received in 12.606 million, and that was the amount that we'd invoiced at that point for actual spend. I can just confirm that we've now also received the balance of 5.238 million. In terms of the actual year-end position, I can give you a brief update. Although this report is just taking us up to period 12, we've obviously been working away on the year-end position, and we're just about to finalise it in the next week or so. So just to give you a brief update on that, it now seems likely that the services that we have delegated to the IGIB will underspend by about 0.236 million. So what we're proposing is that we would transfer that underspend to reserves for use by the IGIB in future years. And also we are now expecting that the non-delegated services will also underspend by 0.758 million. And again, we're proposing to take the underspend to reserves, and we're going to use that underspend for use on budget pressures, including the increase we've been seeing in external residential placements for young people. If I could refer members back to section 2 of the report, committee's asked to note the overspend of 0.309 million position as at 26th of February. Note a previously forecast overspend position of 0.379 million for the year end, and also there's one budget environment, if you could approve that for me. Thank you.
Thanks, Hazel. Any questions? Can we agree the recommendations?
Agreed.
Thank you. Item 4 is the capital budget monitoring for 2020 to 2021 for the period of 1st of April to February 2021, pages 27 to 30, and Lorraine O'Hagan will take us through this.
Thank you, Chair. Good morning, committee. Similar to the revenue report, this is the 5th capital budget monitoring report for the resource for this year, and reflects, as the Chair said, the period to the 26th of February, which is our accounting period 12. Section 3 of your report provides a background and advises that the budget for the year is 844,000, and there's been no change to that budget allocation since we last reported to committee back in March. Section 5 details the financial implications with a breakdown in Appendix A of your report on page 29, showing the 2 projects we have for the resource. Section 5.1 notes the total programme of 844,000, with 100,000 being spent to the 26th of February 2021. Section 5.2 notes the outturn position as at period 12, and that's showing a spend projection of 587,000 at that point, and that's an underspend of 257,000 on the budget. The majority of that is really in relation to the timing of spend, where the budget's required in the new year rather than in 2021. Section 5.3 notes that the progress of a number of projects across the Council have been impacted by the ongoing lockdowns due to COVID-19, and that includes the social work resources projects. Any underspend along with funding will be carried into the new financial year. Again, similar to the revenue position, we do have an update in terms of capital. So we are working on the final outturn position for the resource for the capital programme, and it does look like there has been a minor impact on the predicted outturn for the year as a result of COVID-19. I will bring that final position back to the resource at the next meeting of the committee in early September, following the year-end position being reported to the Executive Committee at the end of this month. So if I can refer committee back to the recommendations in section 2 of the report, and ask that committee note the social work resources budget of 844,000, spend to the 26th of February of 100,000, and an anticipated outturn as at period 12 of 587,000. Thank you.
Thanks, Lorraine. Any questions for Lorraine? No questions. Can we agree the recommendations at 2?
John, I've got Catherine McClymont here. I've got my hand up.
Oh, sorry, Catherine, didn't see you. See you now.
Hi, thanks. No, it was just under... some things are underspent due to COVID, but we've not had a report on what's the replacement for McClymont House for some time now, and I'd appreciate some kind of update from social work. I don't see anywhere else in the committee papers that I could raise this issue, but it's a standing issue on our community council, and I can't give them an update because I don't know what the update is. Thanks.
Can anybody help? Catherine. Ian.
Chair, I would say if one of the operational colleagues could assist with that.
Sure, yeah. Ian.
Yeah, we've touched on this a little bit in the later report on the kind of overall transformation and improvement programme. Really what we're seeing is a lot of the work around that kind of remodelling of residential estate has been delayed as a consequence of kind of COVID. The focus has really been on the Blantyre development and maintaining a bit of momentum around there. That's making good progress. I think what we're essentially saying is we do need to kind of take stock of the current position. There's been quite a significant impact on the residential and nursing sector with COVID. There's several hundred vacancies across the sector, and the demand for residential care has further diminished over the past year or so. So we really want to take some time over the summer to process all of that and come back to the IGB and Social Work Committee with an up-to-date view of where we're at and where we might want to go next. So the care home in Lanark continues to operate with a modest number of residents we're supporting, and we really need to kind of consider the best steps for the future, and then just what we need to commission. So we'll come back with a fuller iteration of what we're thinking, hopefully the next cycle after the recess.
Okay, thanks.
Thank you.
We agree with the report then. Thank you.
Agreed.
Item 5 is workforce monitoring, January to March 2021, pages 31 to 38, and it's Eileen McPake.
Thank you, Chair. Good morning, everyone. This is the standard workforce monitoring report for social work resources for January to March 2021. Section 4.1 outlines the attendance statistics for committee, and the resource absence figure for March 2021 was 6.6%, which is down 1% compared to the previous month and 1.7% higher than the council-wide figure. And compared to the same period last year, it's down 0.8%. This translates to an annual absence figure for the resource for 2021 of 6.5% compared to a council-wide figure of 4.2%. In relation to the council-wide figure of 4.2%, if you exclude COVID-related absence, that would be 3.7%. Section 4.2 to 4.5, the details are in Appendix 2, and the summary is that over the period there were 374 occupational health referrals, there were 76 accidents and incidents recorded, there were 3 disciplinary hearings, no grievances or no dignity at work issues raised. There were 38 leavers during the period, and 29% of them completed exit interviews. Appendix 2A provides a breakdown of vacant posts across the resource during the period, and 67 posts became vacant, and managers have indicated that all of these posts will be filled. So I refer committee back to section 2 and ask that the recommendation that the employment information for social work resources for January to March 2021 is noted. Thank you.
Thanks, Eileen. Councillor Brown. Robert.
Yes, thanks very much, Chair. I want to make a couple of observations. I mean, first of all, the social work figures, I don't think this is particularly new, are quite significantly higher than the council average, and I wondered if there's any ongoing sort of thought about that. Secondly, I noticed at 4.1, there's a very interesting comment about the reductions in musculoskeletal absences, which I suppose is obvious with the people aren't physically in work so much, but also a significant reduction in stomach-related absences due in some part to improved hand hygiene and reduction in social interaction. Now, I wondered if that was kind of like a guesstimate at that, or if that was based on anything particularly specific. Because actually is quite an interesting statistic, isn't it, in a way, and might have some implications for practice and health and safety things later on. Thanks, Chair.
Thanks, Robert. Eileen?
Yeah, you're right. If I take your 2 points in turn, the first point in terms of the absence figure for the resource is generally higher than the council-wide figure, and it is just something that we continue to monitor. We continue to look at trends and also look to make sure that managers are applying the maximising attendance policy and get the proper assistance to enable them to do that. In terms of your second point, it's based on the analysis that we've done around the working days lost for the reasons that are recorded for each absence. And again, it's a trend that we're seeing across the council. It is quite an interesting statistic because we have seen quite a significant reduction in sort of stomach bowel. But I think just because people maybe aren't out and about as much, but there is definitely evidence about the increased practice around hygiene as noted in the report.
Thanks very much. On the first point, if I may just come back on that, I mean, that's all right, continue to monitor. What I really asked was if there was a kind of clear explanation, because it's quite a big figure. Is that the age of the workforce? I think we've discussed this before. Is it the type of job or the particular, if you like, pressures on the job that aren't there in other parts of the workforce? Do we have a clearer view about any of that?
Yeah, it's certainly the demographic of the workforce is different for social work resources. We've maybe got a slightly older age group, so in some parts of the workforce, and in addition to that, the type of work that is being undertaken. Again, that's all taken into account when we're looking at our analysis of our absence.
Okay. Can we read the recommendations at 2? Thank you.
Agreed.
Thank you. And moving on to item 6 is the Social Work Resource Plan 21 to 22, pages 39 to 60, and Martin will take us through this.
Thanks, Chair. Morning, committee. This report is for consideration and monitoring, and just taking you through the report. Section 3 gives a bit of background just in terms of the resource plan. It broadly follows the corporate style and essentially was approved as a package with other resource plan reports at Executive Committee in April 2021. Just turn attention to section 4 of the report, which is really, I suppose, the meat of the report and covers the key areas within the resource plan that's attached in the appendix. Obviously, the introduction just gives a bit of context to the resource and background, etc. Section 2 of the appendix looks at the key areas ahead, and you'll not be surprised to see that they are COVID response and recovery, implementing the transformation agenda, and Ian's going to talk to a paper around that later in the agenda this morning, looking at the implications of independent review of adult social care, managing demand, and you'll see there's quite a bit of figures we've put in about some of the demand across social care over the last number of years. And looking at the top risks, obviously social work was a category 1 responder in line with the council just as a result of the recent COVID pandemic. And also there's some risks around failure to deliver the strategic commission intentions as outlined by the IGIB. And the last area just in that key areas ahead is obviously continuing to deliver our statutory commitments. In terms of outcomes, the resource obviously relates to the council plan around these. So there's about 7 or 8 outcomes that the resource will focus on this year, those being sustainable development, community justice, poverty and disadvantage, vulnerability, health and social care outcomes, the whole mental health and wellbeing agenda, choice and control, workforce, and the whole governance and quality agenda. In the appendix, you'll see there's also quite a number of measures and actions. Now, these are slightly less than what we would have reported in previous years because the resource plans, as you've noticed, across the council have to become more focused on less areas, essentially. So there's 38 measures and actions, and they mainly relate to our statutory functions. And the last section in the appendix is obviously the resourcing of the plan, and that just outlines what the budget is, how the budget's split across the resource, and numbers around workforce. So just taking you back to the front cover of the main report, you'll see there's 3 recommendations there, and they are that the resource plan attached be noted, and that it be uploaded onto the council website following consideration by this committee, and that we'll bring a quarter 2 report in due course around the resource plan. And obviously you'll get a 2 quarterly reports, or 2 performance reports as the year goes on, with the first of those being round about November, December time. And happy to take any questions, Chair.
Councillor Campbell.
Thank you, Chair. Martin, absolutely no surprise that I'm going to bring this up during this paper, and unfortunately it comes through quite a few of these papers. I have some major concerns about resource planning, specifically in social work and adult care services, especially here in the rural wards. Martin and I have had a number of discussions about this over the last couple of weeks and months. I'd like to see a little bit more proactive recruitment and resourcing going into this. And I've spoken to Kay McVeigh at some length about this. We know from the statistics what the turnover of staff are, whether they're social workers or whether they're care at home providers as staff. So I'd like to know what we're going to do about being more proactive. We know how many staff come and go in the council. We get those figures every time we have a social work committee. What are we doing about proactively trying to get ahead of the game when it comes to the void between staff leaving and the time it takes us to recruit more staff? Because especially here in the rural wards, we don't have staff to deliver all of the packages that we have, and we don't have the third-party providers in this area. And I know Jim McGuigan will probably want to talk about this in the last paper on procurement. I certainly am. But we need to be a bit more proactive, I think, in having a continuous recruitment programme going all the time, so that we aren't getting these gaps in service provision, especially here in the rural wards. I don't know if the same problem appears in Hamilton and East Kilbride rather than Cambuslang, but certainly out here in Avondale, staff available to deliver packages, it's just not there.
Thanks, Graham. Martin, what do you come back?
Yeah, I'll say a wee bit, and then Ian, I think. Ian, do you want to come in just now?
Ian.
Yeah, I was just going to pick up on some of that. So, I mean, in terms of key services such as care at home, in terms of the internal service, we have been doing work to recruit ahead of turnover. So, as you're indicating, Councillor Campbell, we've been anticipating how many staff would typically retire, leave, and so forth, and we've been trying to recruit in advance of that. So almost have a surplus of staff for a short period of time to then fill the vacancies, and broadly that's been quite successful. I think that has to be also weaved in with service capacity. So within the staff and establishment and within the budget, we can be pretty much operating at maximum capacity for periods of time. So that is in essence the key issue about being able to access services at times. Within care at home, support living, we also have reliance on external partners. So we've got contracts in play, so we can manage demand through pushing additional business out to the external contracted providers. And we obviously do rely on them trying to recruit locally as well. But essentially what we see at times when we've got peaks in demands, that the system can be pretty full up. So therefore it can be quite difficult to access the service, despite the fact that we're trying to maximise the capacity within the service. So we're trying to create things like kind of peripatetic teams to cover for holidays and absence. So we fill the gaps in there and recruit ahead of turnover. So we are trying to plug those gaps. But it's pretty challenging in terms of demand pressures at times. That's the key issue we're trying to contend with.
Okay, Graham.
Yeah, sorry. It wasn't really a question. It was more of a statement. I know the guys are trying their best. I know it's hard, but it's really hard as an elected member when you have people coming to you saying that I can't get my husband, my wife out of hospital, or we can't get them back into their own home. We're changing this service delivery model, which is going to be a feature throughout this committee today, and I think we just have to be very conscious that we need to come up with some sort of better solution to providing staff, both our own staff and both with third-party providers as well, because I'm not confident there's 100% there, but Martin knows that.
Okay, Graham. Okay, Robert. You're on mute, Robert. Robert, you're on mute.
Oh, sorry. I rather think that Alan and Jim might want to come in on that one, and mine's on a different point. Do you want me to do that just now, or to come back in?
Okay then, Jim, you want to come in? You're on mute, Jim.
Right. Sorry, Robert. I was actually going to try and play the devil's advocate here for a bit of a change. I appreciate fully where Graham's going with this, but I think what we've got is it's a rural issue, and unfortunately, because of that, we need to have more staff to cover the number of clients than we would actually have, let's say, within an urban area. And whereas one member of staff can cover so many number of clients within a space of time, that can be halved, if not worse, if they're actually in a rural setting. And again, I mean that probably going back on what Graham was going to sort of indicate was this all goes back to 2008 when we had the reverse eBay situation, where we lost a lot of private companies under that, and that I was given the assurance that the council would be able to handle it all. Well, we've had a severe dip in the provision of the service to our clients. I think that we're actually coming out of that dip, but it's a very steep climb out of that hole. And that I think that what Graham's indicating is quite correct. We need to be proactive in this. We have got to maybe at times think out with the box. And I think we've got to be very much a case of let's look at what the client's needs are and appropriately put the service in place for that. So, yeah. It's a big difficulty, and it's one which has been there. Graham obviously gets it because his constituents are coming to him and giving an indication. Maybe Robert and myself are a wee bit more in a better place because we're in urban settings. But taking all that into account, it's a very serious situation, and it's one we need to have a very serious and it's maybe at times a bit radical way of looking at things.
Thanks, Jim. Alan?
Thanks, Chair. It's just on page 48, 2.4, the independent review of adult social care was done. I recall we did a review of the home care, and at the time we contracted a critical friend. We've never seen that report from the critical friend. Is that available?
Anybody want to come in on that? I think is that in regard to improving the service of home care? Ian?
Yeah,
just the fact it's a review of adult social care, which home care comes under.
Yeah, so we had the issues in Hamilton and Rutherglen. We brought in some operational support to help us explore just how we could do things better, and that some of that work is featured in our kind of recovery plan around Hamilton, Rutherglen, and really features in a later report that's on the agenda in terms of how we want to remodel the service. I think there was a separate report commissioned by the Chief Executive, and the Chief Executive is the owner of that report, and I think there was feedback given at elected member session from that particular critical friend, David Crawford, who shared his overall kind of findings and recommendations at the time. So I think that's the status of that particular report. So that's working off the committee this morning.
Thanks, Ian. Robert?
Yes, thanks very much. Just following on 2.5, I noticed there's a reference to a 32% rise in the number of children looked after over the last 3 years. That's a pretty staggering figure, and I wonder if there's any background to that gives us a bit of insight. I mean, I've always thought that the whole issue of looked after children, corporate parenting and all that was one of the, if you like, the council's top requirements in terms of the things we need to do. That gives a real challenge. Is there a reason for it? Is that a statistical thing with more proactivity in it? Is it a genuine rise in that respect? What's the background to it?
Leon, can you help here?
Yeah, thanks, Chair. Councillor Brown, the reason for the large spike in those stats is because we now include kinship carers as looked after, so the children are classed as looked after. Prior to 2017, we didn't count, or South Lanarkshire Council didn't count the children as looked after children, and they were just given an allowance. We were wrong to interpret the legislation in that way, and following some challenges from the Scottish Public Services Ombudsman, we had to redefine how we were classifying looked after children who were kinship. So that accounts for the large spike. What we'd say to give some assurance of that, we are now aligned with the national reporting of that, And what that shows us is that we're actually reflecting what the national pictures would be. So we're not an outlier where previously we would have been. That accounts for the 30% increase.
Thank you.
Okay, Margaret Walker.
Thanks, Chair. It was just to ask a question in relation to what some of the previous councillors has been saying about people not getting a service in terms of home care and care packages. When we went into pandemic and COVID, obviously there were a lot of measures taken in relation to some care packages being suspended, a change in the eligibility criteria for people eligible for services. Now that's obviously had an impact. I know that Joe has raised with other leaders, can we discuss where we are in terms of recovery and timescales, for services being put back into place, if indeed they are or not. Because I don't think we've got a wide view of that particular landscape in terms of what's happening out there. And hopefully, if at least, through August, September, October, we're going to be out of this, hopefully. I think we need some sight of the whole landscape in terms of what's happening to these services that were either, put in line, suspended, reduced. I'm not sure if that's directly related to what the previous councillors were saying. It might be in terms of the level of services, and some people maybe that would have got a service that aren't. And it may be something, if we're able to look at the wider landscape in terms of recovery and what's happening across the board in relation to social work services, that we could also discuss in that context as well. Thank you.
Thanks, Margaret. We'll bring in Ian.
Yeah, so care at home services are pretty much back to full functioning, and what's becoming more of a post kind of COVID environment. I suppose I would refer back to my previous response to Councillor Campbell, that what we have is services that are operating at pretty much near maximum capacity. We've extended our commissioning arrangements into the independent sector to give us more resilience around care at home capacity, but we can only operate within the available budget. So I think if I don't know whether Hazel want to kind of add anything to this. So we can only deliver services that we can afford to pay for, and within the capacity within the system. So we're doing what we can do to maximise the availability of services. We're trying to build in some capacity around review, for example. We're bringing in scheduling tools around care at home to maximise efficiency. So there's a couple of reports later on, and probably the next one onwards, where we're trying to make sure we're targeting the resources optimally. We're looking after substantial and critical need. We're investing as much as we can in services which support people to stay at home safely for as long as they can do. But there is a finite financial resource, and there's a finite workforce resource that we're operating within. Yes, there's particular kind of challenges around certain elements of rurality, but we recognise that. And we are trying to push kind of council resources in there where we can't get other providers to come in and offer services. So if we look at somewhere like kind of Clydesdale, for example, we can access services from independent providers in areas such as Carluke and Lanark quite straightforwardly, because there's a certain scale there. Independent providers are less keen to look at more distant parts of the area where they may only be seeing one service user. So in terms of the cost effectiveness of service delivery, they're not keen to look at some of those care packages, but that's where the council is stepping in, and we're providing our own support in those situations. So I would say, as a partnership and as individual services, we're doing our best to make sure we're meeting those substantial and critical needs for the community, but within a finite resource envelope that we need to operate within.
Thanks, Ian. Graham?
Yeah, I just wanted to come back on Margaret Walker's bit there. I just want to be absolutely clear. The guys in social work, in 14 years, I have never had an issue with a constituent not getting a care package, due to budget or any other. Martin and the guys do a really awesome job with getting these care packages sorted out. The challenge we're having here in the rural ward is resource availability, and the availability of resource within our third-party suppliers to be able to deliver that. It's never been I've never seen in, say, in 14 years a budget constraint. I might have seen it for a disabled ramp being put into somebody's house until the next period comes through, but seriously, they're few and far between. I think the guys do a really good job with budgets and care packages.
Thanks very much, Graham. No further questions. Can we agree the recommendations at 2?
Agreed.
Thank you. Move on to item 7. There's a care and support service review and redesign, and it's Ian to take us through this.
Yeah, so this is one of a number of reviews we've been keeping the committee up to date with over the past kind of year or so. It's taken a little bit longer to get to the end of it because of the focus on supporting the COVID response. But we've managed to kind of keep the work moving in the background. So just to remind, the committee, the Care and Support Service, has been established over a number of years. It's a council-operated service for adults with learning disabilities. It's the housing support service. So we triggered the review because the number of service users had diminished over the years. The service had become a little bit fragmented. It was becoming quite expensive in terms of the service delivery model. It was conceived as really people sharing a tenancy with a support package around them. So what we found from the review is that we had more and more people living in their own alone in their accommodation with the same kind of care package, with increasing levels of dependency, and the service needed to be updated and refreshed. So we've done a bit of work with individual service users, with the staff team. We've reduced quite a lot of cost within the service by looking at rotas, by looking at the management supervision arrangements. So we've delivering it within a reduced budget. We've initiated work around things like capacity, adults within capacity and guardianships, because we recognised that a number of the service users and family members were ageing. We didn't necessarily have the legal powers in place, so we've got the fieldwork teams progressing that work. So a couple of things that kind of come out of the review, which we've talked about in section 6 and next steps, things we need to kind of keep on looking at. I think it's important that we maintain a focus on STS principles about operating within a budget based on the assessment of needs, and that might probably suggest further tailoring of the services around individual service users. We think this is a service that's got a future if we revise the specification and have some clarity about who may benefit from the service and the limitations to the service. It's not accepted any new referrals for a number of years. It was a kind of fixed kind of cohort of service users who were brought in and no one else has joined the group. I think if we can get the service configured properly, there'll be opportunities to bring other people into which is actually a very well run, well rated service. A couple of the big issues still before us are around the shift patterns. It's a very traditional kind of model where the staff team do a back shift, do a sleepover, and then they're there the next morning. It provides a very kind of normal, ordinary kind of living experience. So the member of staff doing the sleepover, the service user get ready for bed. Everyone settles down at the same time. Everyone gets up at the same time, has their breakfast together. So that there's quite a lot of benefit in terms of the service model, but what we find is it's not fully compliant with the working time directive, because it does mean that as people do a number of sleepovers over the month, their hours start to breach the 48-hour average time pattern, because that sleepover time kind of counts. So we're now looking at how we might use technology, how we might remodel the staff rotas, doing this in consultation with the trade unions to be more compliant. One of the concerns for us is we could put weekend night shift into the house, but that's essentially, if you imagine a small 2-bedroom flat, for example, and you've got a waking member of staff who's up during the night where you're trying to sleep, making a cup of tea, for example, there's a great risk that the service user is then going to be disturbed by having a member of staff awake rather than one that's asleep. So there are some kind of tricky issues within here in terms of how we take that model forward. But essentially, that's the work for us going forward. So what the recommendation recommendation from the review is that we maintain the service. We've managed to reduce the costs. We make it more SDS focused. We do some work around staff rotas going forward, and hopefully we have will sustain a kind of vibrant service going forward into the future. So I point the committee to the recommendations in section 2, that the findings of the review are noted, and they approve the next phase of us taking forward development of the service as outlined in section 6. So happy to pick up any questions.
Robert.
Yes, this is probably a very stupid question, Chad. I don't think I fully followed why we stopped taking references and referrals in 2010, because presumably there are people, as has been touched on, who could benefit from a service like this, and there's no sort of change in the requirements there. Can you give me some sort of background there? Because apart from anything else, we've ended up in a position, as Liam has touched on, with inadequate use of the resource and all of that because of that. Secondly, the oddity of the 13 service unit users with no legal powers and guardianship orders. Surely that's the sort of thing that should have been picked. That's not an age thing particularly. That's an age, that's presumably much more to do with the learning support aspect of the thing, is it not? Why was that not picked up at a much earlier stage? That must have caused issues right through the existence of this, right back to before 2010.
Well, I think the 2010 decisions around not bringing anyone, I mean, that's a historical position, which I can only assume was related to standing up contracts with a range of supported living providers who provide similar type services. I suppose that was, again, I would agree, is one of the interesting things that came out of the review, that just that kind of historical decision, that legacy that we've been working with has undoubtedly contributed to that kind of diminishing of the service and the fragmentation of it. I think the focus around AWI has probably sharpened over recent years. I think what we find across the system, that there's quite a lot of adults who still have a lot of support from family members. Family have not really thought to go down a guardianship route, and as time moves on, that will undoubtedly cause difficulties around decision making for the adult. So again, that's one of the issues the review has picked up. That unfortunately, a number of adults where, as Councillor Brown's indicating, we probably should have worked with the families before now to sort out guardianship arrangements, and we're now trying to remedy that particular kind of problem.
Do you mind if I come back on one point there, Chair, if I may, which is the issue of the 2010. I remember having a meeting a number of years ago when I was an MSP with a number of people in the Hamilton area. In fact, it was to do with people, adults who had an adult in their family with learning support. They were getting on in years, kind of idea, and they were worried about what would happen when they became unable to look after their adult but learning disabled supported children. So this is not a new issue exactly. It's got ongoing issues there. I'm not sure I've fully followed still the 2010 thing. What happens to people just now? There must be other provision that is made for people in this situation. Is this being looked at, if you like, not just with regard to this service, but overall? Because there's clearly a wider context to this, is there not?
Yeah, so I mean, this is really an issue for the IGB strategic commissioning plan around services for adults with learning disabilities to live within the community. So as well as this service, we have a very substantial kind of contract arrangements with numerous providers who provide supported living arrangements for adults with learning disabilities, adults with mental health challenges who need support to live independently in their own home. So really, what we're trying to do is place the service within that continuum of arrangements. So there'll be some council run services. There'll be a range of other providers. Some have got particular kind of focuses and specialisms. So we're really trying to reinvigorate this model. So the council maintains an element of in-house provision that's complementary to what we access through the contract arrangements. But I think that'll be when we come to refresh the strategic commissioning plan later on this year. We need to make sure we are kind of having an eye to what's the best models of care, what are affordable models of care going forward, and the role of the council relative to other specialist providers. So that will be the focus of the work going forward.
Thank you.
Thanks, David. David Watson.
Yeah, thanks, Sean. Interesting debate, and I'm glad to see what we're having. I tend to think this seems to be a forgotten section of community when we focus on our elderly community through the care homes and care at home, etc. But the disabled and the individuals, adults and children with learning disability maybe don't get the same focus. And wee bit concerned about an experience I had that I was involved in and was aware of with this, and it seems to be financial driven, and Ian alluded to that, and obviously everything's financially driven, but there was a driver to try and get an individual case to go down to a shared care model, and I'm assuming that's what we mean by the core and cluster, which the feeling was that, that wasn't best suited to the individual concerned, and it was quite a battle to actually move away from that and get a suitable arrangement put in place. And I'm just concerned that we focus on this, what you want to call their core and cluster, that we maybe then miss opportunities or maybe something that's better for individuals, but because of the financial models, we're just pushing down the road a core and cluster. So I think we need to look and broaden that a bit and hopefully make it accessible for others. But I think somebody touched on as well the issue of that, a lot of...
Can't do it.
Sorry, a lot of adults with learning disability are staying with elderly relatives and parents, and again it comes down to this guardianship route that I think Ian alluded to as well, that how are we tackling that and how are we getting the message out on that, and so that it's just not folk that's on the radar just now, but we can widen that net and make sure that we capture the vast amount of people that really needed to be brought under that umbrella and advised of that information. Hopefully this is the starting point of an ongoing debate, and we can get further updates as things develop on this. But I really do think it needs to be brought to the fore because there are a lot of underlying issues out there. Thanks.
Thanks, David. Apologies for interrupting there. I thought I was on mute and I was saying something to my wife.
Yeah, I just offer a couple of comments there. I think the important thing is we're focused on outcomes going forward. So from a commissioning point of view, we're commissioning to meet outcomes. If an individual service user and carer, is what the outcomes we need to meet for them primarily, and then we think about the money afterwards, and particularly service models. So we shouldn't be too fixated with a particular kind of service model. It's about how do we keep this person safe, how do we keep them included in the community, how do we support their carer. Those should be the outcomes that we're focusing in on. The whole principles of SDS is looking at how we allocate a proportionate share of the available resource based on those level of needs and based on those outcomes. So that's really what we're kind of trying to push through a number of these reviews, that kind of focus on that kind of policy, on that kind of legislation in terms of outcomes. The budget follows the outcomes, and then we consider how best to put in place services. So really the role of the commissioning plan will be to help us to redesign and refresh our service delivery model going forward. In terms of things like adults with incapacity, Self-Directed Support Act in itself brought renewed focus in terms of AWI, in terms of carers having the right powers in place to be able to access and make use of direct payments and so forth. So you're correct, Councillor Watson, in terms of maintaining that kind of support for families to make sure they're sighted on those issues and are making the right decisions on behalf of their family member. And that's really a lot of the work of the social workers going forward, to make sure we support carers in that way and give them the best advice we can.
Hugh.
Thanks, Chair. I'm going to follow up on what Robert and David were asking in terms of the adults with incapacity. Can I ask how long the assessments have been outstanding, Ian, and what the timescale is for getting those completed, and whether or not the delay is down to us not having sufficient numbers of qualified staff to undertake and review the assessments as well?
Yeah, I think that there's a range of issues in here. So in many ways, care and support has been a well-run service. People have been safe and well looked after for years. So I think there's maybe not been sufficient attention paid to the AWI as a consequence of that. So the review has reinvigorated that. So the review team has now engaged with locality teams, identified the folks where capacity issues need to be progressed, and that work's ongoing within the team. So I think Councillor MacDonald, I mean, the AWI process in the best of times can be quite lengthy, and we add in the COVID complexities and having to discuss with family members the best routes. That's kind of adding a bit of time to it. So it's certainly very much on my focus to get that work progressed as quickly as we can do now over the next number of months, just so we have the right powers in place to support the Guardian, whether it's a family member or Liam as Chief Social Officer, to make the right decisions on behalf of the individual. I would never complain if someone was to offer me an opportunity to have more social workers. But actually, one of the things that we are encountering is challenges in terms of recruitment around social workers. Again, I have a sense that there's the demand for that skill set and the supply of workforce is not in kilter from a national level. We're perpetually in a round of recruitment into those posts, and it's difficult to maintain a full establishment of social workers in the present time.
Can I ask Ian if there's been any adult support and protection issues as a result of the lack of guardianship being in place? And also in terms of the core and cluster model that David was mentioning earlier, has there been any thought about who would provide that service going forward? And also, just to kind of finalise my question in terms of whether there's been any assessment carried out between the quality of service between the private third sector organisations and our own service going in to provide that support?
Yeah, a number of questions in there. So in terms of the care and support service, we don't have any concerns around adult support and protection. Say that it's a well-run service. Any issues are reported regularly, and we pick up on them. In terms of quality, we've got a high degree of confidence in terms of the supported living providers, but we have identified some gaps in structure in terms of being able to have sufficient oversight of that. So the previous social work committee, we agreed to use some new funding to create some additional posts around kind of commissioning and quality, because I think the two go hand in glove in terms of the commissioning cycle. Developing that market, having confidence in the providers' quality, and thinking about what we then kind of recommission through the procurement process. So we're in the process of going out to recruitment, so to bring us in some additional capacity around that. So I hope that kind of covers the territory you're looking for some assurance on.
Yeah, just in terms of the core and cluster, in terms of any thoughts going forward in terms of who would be providing the service?
Yeah, so in terms of core and cluster, I mean, in terms of the current model, we have quite a fragmented picture in terms of where people are located. So really going forward, it's in terms of economies of care, having people gather together in a more geographic patch is more effective. So if I point to one of the later agenda items, the housing model that's been built down in Blantyre in the St Joseph site, where you've got kind of 20 tenancies within a neighbourhood, we can probably support overnight needs there, for example, quite effectively with a couple of staff, so we can respond immediately. We don't necessarily have to be in the person's own home. We can pop in and see them. We can use technology according to the person's support plan to deliver a safe and cost-effective model. So that's the kind of idea that we've got. So we're quite keen to start engaging with housing colleagues in terms of the kind of the SHIP and the strategic housing plan about other opportunities within the council developments going forward to kind of consolidate some of the housing provision and develop that, and other kind of housing providers, housing associations who might have similar kind of thoughts that we could partner up with to develop the model going forward. So I think not just for learning disability, but also for older adults, there's something in that kind of concept of being able to allow people to live in their own home in the heart of the community, but cluster them in such a way that we can provide that kind of effective, cost-effective kind of care model in a safe and efficient way.
Thanks, Ian.
You're on mute, John.
Yes, I just realised that. Lynn?
Thanks, Chair. I know Ian's gone over some of this, but if you could just indulge me, I've got a couple of points to raise. This current model came into being in 2004, and yet by 2010, just 6 years later, no more referrals were made. Somebody made that decision not to accept any more referrals just 6 years down the line. I'd like to know why the model was effectively from there on being run down. I appreciate the economies of scale. This model was set up with the idea that people would live together in a multiple occupancy setting, and that as time's gone by, the majority are now in single occupancy, which is stretching resources. That I understand. But in terms of the average age of these people, I understand that the majority are now quite elderly. I would imagine that they would be quite upset, perhaps resistant, even distressed at the concept and potential move. How would that be managed? I mean, I appreciate that long-term in their own interests, it might be better for them with the staffing availability and perhaps even company that they would be able to enjoy. But I'm just wondering how you would manage that. So the question is, why after just 6 years was this model effectively closed down and no further referrals taken? What's the average age of the people that we're talking about? And how are you going to mitigate the upset and distress and resistance that's inevitably going to occur? Thank you.
Yeah. Okay. I mean, in terms of the first point about decisions made in 2010, it's quite difficult because it kind of predates the Health and Social Care Partnership, and I think most of the people from the management team on the committee. So I can only speculate that it may have been linked to the decisions around going out to tender or procure external services, so having that kind of more mixed economy of in-house versus external service. But I'm just speculating there. I don't have the history there. I think you're correct. I think the main body of the review report's got information in the age profile, so it is an ageing group, and folks are quite settled. They've been looked after by predominantly the same care team for a considerable time, so any kind of changes to the care arrangements do need to be managed very carefully, very sensitively, and that's one of the reasons why we're keen to make sure there's guardianship arrangements in place, so that there's proper powers there to safeguard the individual. We may be looking at bringing in advocacy support around some of that. But what I would say, I mean, this is day-to-day business for social workers, managing complexity, working with people to make sure that services are in place that meet their best interests, that are cost-effective and safe kind of care models. So I think we have a good track record of working with service users and carers to manage changes in care arrangements sensitively. So we'll be doing this at a reasonable pace. We're not going to be rushing into doing things too quickly. We want to engage with people, we want to work with them, we want to make sure we get the best outcomes for individuals. And it may be that for one or two people this care model can't meet their level of dependency. We've already had one or two of those discussions, and people have moved on to different services. But yeah, are right, we have got service users who say that they're a bit isolated, they're a bit lonely. The person you used to share with is no longer there. They miss that kind of company. So we do want to kind of try and make some changes to support people from that point of view. So maybe just to show you that we'll be doing this in partnership with the service user and their next of kin, their family members and guardians, to make sure we get good outcomes for folks.
Jim?
I can maybe cast my mind back to 2010, and I'm hoping that my memory is as good as it should be. I seem to recall that there was a similar exercise to what had actually happened with the home care provision, namely that there was a concept or a philosophy running along the management team and the social work at that time, which meant that they were trying to cut down on the number of suppliers. They were trying to focus it onto maybe 4, maybe 6 suppliers. And in the case of the provision that we're talking here, I seem to recall it was actually less than that. It was down to 2 or 3 private sectors provision. And yes, it was actually driven from the point of view of cost, because obviously we were looking to get the best contract. But what was also relevant at the time was that the private providers were actually essentially dictating the terms of the contract, i.e. the time and the type of provision which was being provided to our service users. When, in my opinion, it should be the other way around. We should have been dictating to the provider as to the type of contract, etc., that was actually be provided. And essentially, if they weren't able to do that, then fine, we would then go to somebody else. So I think that was the situation that we had at that time. I'm willing to be proven wrong, but I seem to recall that was the case.
Thanks, Jim. Martin?
Okay, Councillor Nellon, you're testing my memory here because it's going back 11 years, but I was here at the time and I seem to recall that was a point we went to Cairn Support North and Cairn Support South from an in-house service perspective. But at that time, there was a lot of providers in the market who were actually offering, if you think about the model we had then as an in-house provision, it was a more dispersed model. And what the market was offering was the opportunity to bring people together in sort of smaller groups. So you'll see from a paper that's on the agenda later, there's an adult supported living in the contract paper. We've committed to quite a lengthy 15-year contract around adult supported living. And that's in a sense to actually cater for that choice, so you don't have, so you're moving more towards a sort of core and cluster model. That way. So from memory, that was a decision that we took back in 2010, and that dictated the amount of referrals coming into the service or not at that stage, because there was better options and choice within the marketplace, if you see where I'm coming from, if I'm explaining that correctly.
Yeah, thank you. That's between you've clarified that perfectly. Thank you.
Mary?
Yeah, just clarification as well on the core and cluster. Having worked a long time with supported living, is that bringing people together, albeit in their own individual flats, as opposed to the model of independent living? I'm a bit confused where we're going here.
Okay, so I think what we're advocating is the principle of people living as independently as they can do in their own home and being included in the community as far as possible, and putting a staff team in to support them in that respect. So one of the issues, I suppose, around that is affordability and efficiency of care. So I'll give an example of overnight care. So overnight care costs at least £100 per person, to put them in. So if I've got 10 people, all with their individual support, that's going to cost me £1,000 a night. If I bring them together in a core and cluster, I might only need 2 staff to support the same cohort just as safely, just as well. So that's only going to cost me £200 to deliver that service. So it's about making best use of the resource available and making best use of people's STS budgets. So core and cluster might be the difference between someone being able to live in the community versus a kind of residential care setting in terms of safety and affordability, and even workforce supply, because we've discussed already, workforce can be in scarce supply in terms of particular skill sets in particular geographies.
Thanks, Ian. No further questions. Can we agree the recommendations at 2?
Agreed.
Thank you. Still got quite a full packed agenda to get through. That was a very healthy discussion. I don't want to stifle debate. However, we're well over an hour, not even halfway through. So if we can keep things salient and relevant, to the point. It would be very good. Thank you very much. Moving on to item 8 is the promise post, pages 83 to 86, and Liam will speak to this post.
Thank you, Chair. The purpose of this report is to provide the committee with an update on the implementation of the recommendations of the care review, and it's looking to establish 2 additional posts, which we're calling the promise posts. You'll see section 3 just reminds the committee of our statutory responsibilities to provide corporate parenting support, and that's across Scotland, and we've undertaken that within South Lanarkshire. You'll see 3.2 and 3.3, it makes reference to the independent care review and the findings of that, and it's looking at the root and branch review that started in 2016, looking at legislation, practices, culture and ethos. Further on in the report, through section 3, you'll see at 3.5 that the Corporate Parent Strategy Group undertook a task of establishing a champions board, and that was established in December 2019. There's obviously been a bit of a hiatus throughout the pandemic, but the board is running, it is up and running, but probably not as far advanced as we would have hoped it to be. 3.7 onwards actually describes the 2 posts that we're looking at, and we're calling them the promise posts. And it gives the roles and remits, and it's about engaging with people with lived experience, or we're wanting these posts to be employed for people with lived experience to work with our looked after community, but also to be the conduit to the professional networks that are available. In terms of the employee implications at section 4, it is 2 full-time posts, and as I said, it will be people with the living and lived experience that will be offered these posts. Will ring fence it specifically to that client group. And section 5 gives the financial implications. The posts are approximately £80,000 per year, but what we've managed to do is to secure 50% of the funding from the Health Board, who see the value of these posts as well. So in terms of the recommendations, I can refer the committee back to section 2, and we're looking for the progress across the partnership with the implementation of the care review to be noted, and for the establishment of the 2 full-time equivalent promise posts we're looking at. Happy to take any questions.
Thanks, Liam. Any questions for Liam? Can we agree the recommendations at 2?
Agreed.
Thank you. We'll move on to item 9, is the additional counselling posts, pages 89 to 92, and Liam will speak to this one as well.
Thank you, Chair. This builds on the theme of the independent care review. And you'll see within this report what we're asking the committee to do is to approve the development of a full-time equivalent counselling post within the service. Through the Scottish Government, we've managed to get mental health and wellbeing money, which has been ring-fenced for children's services partnerships to look to deal with from pre-birth right through to 25-year-olds who are suffering from trauma or mental health issues in the community. Part of the review here is looking at the Children's Services Plan, and this is a partnership report on behalf of the partnership, Director of Social Work, the Executive Director of Education, but also Finance, but also colleagues within health. And we're looking to see how we can enhance our support for children and families that have gone through trauma in the community. The reason this is a bit different from the counselling posts within the school and from counselling posts that are within LAC, because these are children that would usually fall out of the in between the gaps. They're also not high enough as a tariff to get CAMS posts. So what we're looking to do is to give these a counselling support for them so that they don't escalate into CAMS or serious mental health issues, but that we can support them within the community. And we're going to align them to our family support teams. So we're looking for the creation of the post identified at section 4, and it's for a full-time counsellor post for a period of 23 months, because that aligns with the funding from the Scottish Government to address mental health issues for kids within the community. Thank you.
Thanks, Liam. Any questions for Liam? Can we agree the recommendations at 2?
Agreed.
Thank you. Item 10 is the additional non-recurring section 27 funding to address the backlog in justice social work delivery date due to the pandemic. Pages 93 to 100, and Liam will speak to this one.
Yep, thank you, Chair. Again, the title is what it says on the tin here. Due to the pandemic, there's been a backlog with regards to justice services and how we can deliver justice services. And in section 3, you'll see some of the background that the Justice Board of the Scottish Government have done a mapping and scoping about what that demand will look like over the next year and further years. And you'll see quite a startling statistic that are saying it might take a decade before we can clear the backlog up of the court service. Further in section 4 within the report, you'll see that the current circumstances within South Lanarkshire Council and the areas of challenge which we have, which are reflected nationally across every local authority. And there are 7 services which we've highlighted within that section 4. So it's predominantly the unpaid work service, the Caledonian programme, which deals with perpetrators of domestic abuse, the drug treatment and testing order service, the moving forward making changes service, which is about dealing with high-risk sex offenders. We're looking at court services in terms of bail supervision, and we're looking at diversion of prosecution and whole system approach. So within section 4, you'll see the wide range of services where we have got quite a significant challenge. The section 4.4 also talks about third sector expenditure as well. Part of the condition of the grant of the 740,000 was that we had to commission third sector providers, and it wasn't all statutory providers. So at 4.6.1, you'll see the breakdown of the third sector organisations which we are supporting within that. And that's predominantly because we do have contracts with these organisations, so it was easy just to do a variation in the contract for that grant. Section 5.1 gives a list of the posts that we were looking to establish for 1 year. These are fixed term posts to try and address the backlog. Some of the posts, particularly the social work posts and the senior practitioner posts, have been established as permanent posts. And that's on the basis that we can manage the risk because of the turnover of staff, where we don't think that would become problematic for us if we don't get additional funding for the following years. Section 5.2 is looking at planning and development officer posts within the service, and these will be permanent posts. And the funding's been established through reconfiguration of the current planning and performance team. So we can take the committee back to the recommendations at section 2. We're looking for the establishment of the fixed term post as highlighted at 5.1, and the additions to the social work resources as identified at 5.2, and that these are approved.
Thanks very much, Liam. Any questions for Liam? No questions. Can we agree the recommendations at 2?
Agreed.
Thank you. Moving on to item 11, and it's overtime reduction update at pages 101 to 104, and Liam's going for a 4-timer.
Yep, thank you. Be very quick, don't worry. It's to provide an update on the proposals to reduce overtime within services. Now, this paper specifically about residential services within children's houses. Section 3 just gives a bit of the background that since 2016-17 we've been a £500,000 target of reducing overtime within the resource. And what we've done is we've established various posts over the years. So we've established 5 posts, peripatetic posts, which was using enhanced overtime and higher rate overtime, and we were converting that into actual full-time substantive posts. So 3.6 gives a background to the 5 peripatetic posts we established 2 years ago. One of the problems we've got with that is that peripatetic workers then want to get an established full-time contract. They are full-time, but they want that security of the one house. So what we've done now is we're through the overtime that we're still incurring. We have reduced overtime, but there still is an enhanced rates. We are establishing a team of 10.1 full-time equivalent peripatetic, and they'll actually be managed within a central resource as opposed to aligned to a children's house. And that will allow us to manage any sickness, holidays and training events, and we'll see a reduction in enhanced overtime. So section 6 has got the employee implications, and it's the establishment through the conversion of enhanced overtime rates to create the 5.1 peripatetic posts. Thank you, Chair.
Thanks, Liam. Any questions for Liam? Can we agree the recommendations at 2?
Agreed.
Thank you very much. Item 12 is Carers Fund increase to establishment, page 105 to 108, and Ian will take us through this.
Thanks, Chair. So this report proposes establishment of some additional posts to support our duties under the Carers Act, and generally in terms of our duties around assessment and care management. So I suppose what the report is flagging is the importance of good assessment and care management activity, and that both supports the supported person and the carer. So introduction of new legislation such as Self-Directed Support Act, the Carers Act, has brought this additional kind of burdens in that respect. So we get feedback from carers about concerns about the time it takes to get assessments completed and work progressed, and how that impacts on their caring capacity. So what we're proposing is we increase the workforce establishment across the 4 localities, putting an additional 4 social work assistants into each of the locality teams to support the work around carers support plans, making sure that resources are targeted effectively. This has been funded out of some new money that's come our direction to support the implementation of the Act. So this will use some of the funding in terms of workforce. The remainder of the funds can be used to support service delivery. And in the report, we're also flagging the work we're doing with the Carers Centre to work with folks with low and moderate needs as well. So we've got that kind of blended approach of Carer Centre provides some of the assessment support, and we've then got a skill mix within the resource of social work assistants and social workers, which we can deploy according to the level of complexity involved in the case. So point the committee to the recommendations in section 2 to note the report and to approve the changes to the establishment. Thanks.
Thanks, Ian. I see Alan's got his hand up.
Thanks, Chair. Just 2 questions here. One, I've asked this before, are these posts being advertised externally?
So we haven't got to that stage yet, but I would imagine obviously the posts will be advertised. I think there's a later report in the pack where we'll be flagging there may be some redeployment issues, and maybe that some staff will move from existing posts into these particular kind of job roles. But I would imagine there'll be at least some of the reports will be post advertised externally in due course. But we're still to work through the detail of that with HR, and obviously thinking through the implications of the later report in Care at Home.
Another question, Chair. Ian raised a point there, working with the Carers Centre in regard to people with moderate needs. My understanding of the Carers Centre's to support carers, not to support parent service users. Is its mandate changed?
It's supporting carers with low and moderate needs, so there's an eligibility framework for carers as well. So where carers have needs at the low to moderate element, the Carer Centre are doing the carer support plans, and I mean a lot of this will be targeting them towards community assets that they will be able to make use of to provide support in terms of caring for their family member, or indeed support for themselves. And where things start getting more complex, the Carer Centre will refer the carer into the HSCP, where hopefully this new team will provide some additional resource to deliver that kind of assessment and support activity.
Thanks for that.
Okay, Margaret Walker.
Thanks, Chair. Just to actually welcome the report. I mean, the impact on unpaid carers of the pandemic has been, significant. And I mean, recent surveys from, Scotland's Scottish carers highlighted that the increase in number of hours that unpaid carers have now got to fulfil has been, relatively high in comparison to, pre-pandemic rates. So I'm pleased to see that we will actually be, implementing the Carers Act, and that they will hopefully be assessed and get the support that they need. And I suppose my question around that is, are we going to be able to provide the levels of support in terms of, I mean, many carers say that they don't get enough respite, they haven't got emergency plans put into place, so we'll be able to address some of those issues through this.
Yeah, so there's the 2 elements in there. So doing that kind of work with the carer around things like emergency plans, I think we need people to sit with them to do that work. So this will give us more capacity to do that. And in terms of access to services, I would argue that good assessment and care management is the core to that. So we're making sure we're understanding people's needs, we're understanding the outcomes to be met. We've got an effective support plan in play that will meet those outcomes. So as we talked about a couple of times already in this meeting, that resources are stretched. So bringing some additional capacity in to support that kind of good support planning will be beneficial all around, and make sure that the available resource is targeted effectively, and people get access to the resources as quickly as we can do that.
Thanks.
Okay, thank you.
Hugh?
Thanks, Chair. Just to follow up on Alan's point, I was just wondering, Ian, if we have done any work in identifying the numbers of carers with additional needs that are providing support, and whether we know that whether there are any clusters in any particular areas.
Yeah, I don't think we've got a definitive answer on that, but we are doing quite a bit of work now with the carer centre. So we've sort of initiated a bit of a kind of meetings programme with them, just to try and collaborate as effectively as we can do, identify issues and trying to progress that. So but we are, again, it's another area we're trying to improve our performance, improve our intelligence, I suppose, of what's needed out there, and target the resource accordingly.
I see Martin's hands up there. Martin?
Yeah, Councillor MacDonald, we actually get a quarterly, as part of the commission service with Lanarkshire Carers Centre, or Lanarkshire Carers, we get a quarterly report that comes in that identifies all the new carers that we've come in, or the centres come into contact with. What I'll do is I'll check that for you, and if there is anything, I'll pop you on some information.
That'd be great, Martin. Does it specifically ask, though, that if the carer has additional needs, so that they're able to identify that and categorise it a bit better?
It looks at the whole need in terms of the carer. Yep.
Okay. Thanks, everyone. No further questions. Can we agree the recommendations at 2?
Agreed.
Moving on to item 13 is the Swiss Plus replacement, pages 105 to 116, 109 to 116, and it's Martin will take us through this.
Yeah, I'll try and be quick with this one, Chair, just conscious of time. So this report here is to outline to the committee and proposals we've been working on to replace the current Swiss Plus system. And section 3 and 4 of the report really just outline what the case for change is. We've got a system here that we've been working with for nearly 30 years now, and I think we've probably wrung the neck out it is how I would put it, in terms of how we've developed it, and its capacity for future development now is really at an end point. What section 4 also outlines is some of the benefits of replacing the systems. I think this is good news for the resource overall, in that it should allow us to focus more or divert more time to frontline practice, rather than obviously quite a lot of time spent on case recording, etc. Section 5 outlines the system replacement costs, and in all, you're talking about a 1.2 million sum to replace the system, coupled with a project team to support the implementation of that and ongoing revenue costs. So the total cost envelope for this project would be 2.634 million. The section 5 just further outlines just some of how we would intend to do this, and outlines what the scope of that project team will be, together with some timescales at section 5.8 and how we would intend to use a project management approach to do this. Section 6 outlines some of the benefits again of why we would do this, because what it should allow us to do, as I was saying earlier, is divert more frontline worker time to manage demand. And you'll see there in 6.2 we've just outlined some of the trends in demand and how they've changed over time, and you'll see there's quite a significant number of rises around some of the statutory work that we do. Section 7 is just around the leadership and management of the project. So there'll be a project sponsor nominated for this to oversee the project, and the project team will report into that, and governance will be back obviously through regular reporting to Social Work Committee, and this will form as a standing item part of Ian's transformation report, where we'll give an update on how this project's going. So Section 9, the financial implications, which I've covered, and section 10 and 11 are just the standard climate change and other implications. So just going back to the recommendations, and I'm not going to read these all out, but what I will draw committee to is just the recommendation 4, that the capital funding for this has still to be approved at executive committee, but subject to that being approved, what we're then asking committee to do is allow us to obviously establish the posts on the system for the project team. And I'm happy to take any questions, Chair.
Thanks, Martin. Graham?
Yep, thanks, Chair. I mean, obviously, as Chair of the Cross-Party IT Working Group, I absolutely welcome this report. I think I was first involved with Swiss back in North Lanarkshire Council, literally fresh off the boat, literally in 1997. And I think Swiss was about 10 or more years old back then. I think, Martin, you've absolutely wrung the neck of this system, as most systems would be replaced after 5 to 10 years. This one's been going on for well over 30 now. looking at the budget, the question I have, are you absolutely confident the budget set aside is enough? I have some, knowing Swiss fairly well, I have some major concerns given what we're seeing at during the replacement of the housing system, that we are covering data migration here, because Swiss is a very old system based on very, very old data models. You're moving it into 21st. You will be moving it into 21st century system. And I want to be absolutely sure that you're confident that you're going to cover the data migration, because it's extremely important that we get all of our service users onto this new system with minimal issues, because it has the potential to really screw things up if we get this wrong.
No, you've actually hit the nail on the head around the difficulty with a project like this, or one of the main challenges, which is obviously the data migration. And as you outlined, what we're moving from is essentially a 30-year-old system and technology onto a cloud-based system. So essentially that's why in the project team, Councillor Campbell, you'll notice we'll get 3 business systems engineers. That's partly to help with some of that. And we've also got 3 project officers, which will be looking at the children's agenda or the children's data, one for adults and one for justice, but also one for finance. So what we've tried to do is we've tried to push the envelope out around the project team to make sure that's adequately resourced to do this. But at the same time, through the engagement and background work we've done, we've spoke to East Ayrshire, Falkirk, Fife, and also we're doing a bit of work with North Lanarkshire as well, because North Lanarkshire are actually replacing their system at the same time as ourselves, and as you rightly point out, they're on Swiss as well. And that issue around data migration is the thing that any of those particular areas have been saying to us, you need to properly resource that. Hence why we've went for a slightly bigger project team than the likes of Ayrshire went for, and the likes of Fife and Falkirk and the other areas. So I'm hoping that will be sufficient for us to manage this through.
Thank you.
Okay, thanks very much. Hugh.
Thanks, Chair. Just to, I suppose, bring people up to speed in terms of East Ayrshire, I was involved in the whole implementation of that, and there was a big miss for us, Martin, in terms of the actual reporting aspect to the new system, in terms of pulling social work reports across that. So it's just to make you guys aware that was something that was missed for the original part that we did, and that did result in an add-on cost. So just to make sure that that's included as well, because that was a fairly substantial increase in the overall cost, because we'd missed that part out in the original bid that we'd accepted.
Again, a good point, Councillor MacDonald, because that's one of the things, see the engagement we've done. There's 5 providers on the Scotland Excel framework, which gives us a faster route to procurement around this. And a lot of the questions I have been asking them and probing them on is, what is the capacity for the system to do things like, just as you've outlined, reports, but also, I think Councillor Walker mentioned this maybe a year or so ago around outcomes and how we're able to report outcomes. And that for me really needs to be a kind of deal breaker for us around getting a new system. We need to be able to report outcomes to support some of the stuff Ian was talking about earlier around commissioning, etc. Because if we know the outcomes that are working, or the inputs that are working to achieve those outcomes, the commissioning models that we procure in the future should be ever better. So we're putting a lot of time and effort. There's going to be a dedicated management info officer working alongside us with this project as well. Now, that's not in the project team, but that's just a resource I'll bring over and align to the team to enable us to obviously meet that requirement.
Okay, thanks everyone. Can we agree the recommendations at 2?
Agreed.
Thank you very much. We'll move on to item 14, self-directed support, direct payments monitoring review, pages 117 to 120, and Ian will take us through this.
Thanks, Chair. So this report proposes the establishment of a couple of posts to help us in managing direct payments. As the report kind of highlights, we've now got around about £7 million of STS funding going out as a direct payment, and we anticipate that be a value that will grow over coming years. And we're actually keen to see that value grow, because it indicates we're offering maximum kind of choice and control to service users and carers. But what the report really goes on to flag is the this adds a layer of complication into the process. So we've got social workers who are the role is really around the care elements of the review, and not so much expert in terms of the financial nuances around this. So when we do ad hoc exercises, we find that people often have fairly large sums of unspent money sat in bank accounts that's kind of caused them a bit of concern and stress about what they do about having this sum of council money. And we're trying to put in place here stronger arrangements to support both the social workers, but also service users and carers in terms of how they use direct payments, how we pull money back in where money's not being spent because of changing circumstances, which is quite a kind of common issue. We are confident that in terms of funding these posts, that'll be almost like self-funding from within the £7 million budgets, that by making sure we're maximising income recovery and redistribution, and that some of that will contribute towards the cost of the posts. So we see this as a benefit, both in terms of good stewardship of the council's funds, but also in terms of supporting both the workforce and service users in terms of the SDS and direct payment process. So ask the committee to look at recommendations in section 2, which is really approving the changes in the existing workforce and the additional posts that we've outlined in the table in 4.1. Thanks.
Thanks, Ian. Hugh?
Thanks, Chair. Ian, it's just a quick question in terms of how the SDS support has been utilised over the period, because there's a number of families that have been in contact with me who have used their SDS funding fairly imaginatively, because the services that they had originally thought that would meet the outcomes that were assessed hadn't been available. So I'm assuming that it is perfectly fine for those individuals to use that funding as imaginatively as they can do to meet the outcomes that have been agreed in the assessment.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. I mean, the whole principle of SDS, I think, as you're very familiar with, is to allow that kind of innovation, that kind of flexibility of support. So as long as they're meeting the agreed outcomes, and as long as it's legal, we're happy to support it. But I think what this report recognises that people's circumstances change, that carers are able to apply more time, less time, people come unwell and so forth, go into hospital, and that can sometimes mean accumulation of budget. So across a large number of people, small amounts of money mount up, and so it's just to make sure we've got sight of that and managing that effectively.
Okay, no further questions. Can we agree the recommendations at 2?
Agreed.
Thank you. Moving on to item 15, care at home services, pages 121 to 130, and Ian's again.
Okay, thanks, Chair. So this is a fairly substantial report, substantial change that we're proposing here in around care at home. I suppose for a while now we've been discussing some of the legacy issues with the care at home service, the kind of the structure of the service, and the way the care at home, one of the key job roles of a care coordinator is an amalgamation of staff support, scheduling, support planning, and we've been keen to unpack that and sort of streamline and rationalise that for the benefit of service users. I mean, some of the issues that the care inspector have picked up, particularly around Hamilton and Rutherglen, linked to the quality, the nature of the support provided by the coordinators. We've also highlighted that the management support currently is really a Monday to Friday 9 to 5 arrangement, and the service itself is up and running from really probably about 6 o'clock in the morning in terms of the staff calling in with if they're not able to attend work, for example. Staff are out working late in the evening and are clearly working 7 days a week. So what this report is proposing is I suppose a fundamental change in the structure to the I suppose the management and supervision and scheduling of care. It dovetails with the introduction of the new total mobile scheduling system that we've now rolled out pretty much across all of Hamilton, and will continue to roll out beyond over the rest of the year. To benefit from the system, you really need to have kind of constant monitoring of it to make the adjustments and interventions required to schedule care optimally and efficiently and safely. So by agreeing to this proposal, what we would have in place would be a 7-day-a-week scheduling and duty system around care at home. that would start early in the morning and go through to late evening. We think this would be a much safer service, a much more effective service, and would provide better support for our carers at the front line, because there'd be somebody in the office to respond to them whenever they're at work, and it also optimises the service delivery. So we're making best use of the workforce, best use of that staffing resource in terms of the delivery of care. It does, however, mean quite a lot of changes in the workforce. So in particular in the care coordinator job role, a number of those posts would be removed from the structure and replaced by different posts at different grades. I would like to make a link between this report and the previous one on the establishment of social work assistants around the carers fund. So in terms of our discussions with the HR team and the trade unions about impact on the workforce, we're keen to make available a number of posts to staff who are impacted that are at a similar grade, with the usual kind of protections that the council affords to folks who are displaced from one job role into another. So we're asking the committee to approve the recommendations in section 2 around fundamentally the changes in the workforce arrangements, the removal of particular posts and the replacement of those by a range of new posts within a new model of service delivery. I've got the service manager, Scott McNeil, on the call this morning as well, in case there's any particularly kind of technical points anyone wants to pick up. So Scott's been close to the introduction of Total Mobile and has been leading the discussions with the trade unions and so forth in terms of the impact on workforce. So Scott's available to pick up any questions that that he may be able to answer better than I can. So hand back to the chair to deal with any points coming up.
Thanks, Ian. Alan? Alan, you're on mute.
Sorry. Right, Chair.
Okay, fine.
Thank you. Right. In regard to the reports 126 and 127 about the change of posts and grades and that, and 127 at 7.4 and 7.5, 3 times we mentioned consultation with staff, consultation with scheduling supervisors. We're waiting for that consultation to take place. Should this not have been done prior to this report coming?
So this is a situation we've been discussing with the trade unions for quite some time in terms of proposed changes. So we've kept trade unions appraised of the thinking all along, and in fact they've been chasing us a little bit in terms of bringing things to a conclusion. So Scott has had some engagement with trade union on this particular report and met with the staff affected over recent days to discuss the implications of it. I don't know whether, Scott, you want to add a couple of words in about that for Councillor Faulkner.
Yeah, thanks, Ian, and good morning, committee. We've been engaged in discussions with the trade unions probably for a significant number of months, actually. The kind of principles which we're outlining today in terms of the reports have been principles which we've been working to for some period of time. Obviously, the kind of finer detail is the kind of things which we've been talking to the trade unions in more recent days and weeks. There was also 3 sessions held on Thursday of last week where all managers within the service and all staff affected within the service were invited to come along to a presentation which I delivered to outline the kind of proposals that are kind of detailed within the report. Also a very clear commitment, obviously, for continued consultation, firstly with the trade unions, but also with staff, both on a collective basis and also on an individual basis as we go through the process in the kind of coming months.
Thanks, Scott. Alan, yeah. Okay.
Can I take, Chair? I mean, we've been approached by the trade union movement and 2 officers of the trade union. And one says it was presented to the workforce on Thursday, then it's a bank holiday weekend, then it goes in front of the social work committee. That's for a steward of the social work. I mean, consultation, you consult with people and then you go forward. You don't come with your plans and then say, oh, we'll consult with you after it. I mean, I would need to say that I would be looking for the consultation to have taken place before I'd be happy to approve this paper.
So I suppose that's been trying to set out there, Councillor Faulkner. I mean, this is a discussion that's been going on for some considerable time. When Scott first started with this, when we had a range of sessions about 18 months ago with much of the workforce here discussing the future of care at home, discussing working over 7 days a week, talking about the scheduling tool. So the workforce has been aware of some of the thinking for some time, and as Scott said, we've had quite extensive discussion with the trade unions over the time frame in terms of our intentions, our thinking, and I'm not understanding that there's any great opposition to that from the trade union. Their interests are in protecting the existing workforce and making sure that their terms and conditions are protected as well as they can do, that they remain in employment, that we protect their salary levels and hours of work and so forth. And that's been the activity that Scott's been leading on with the trade unions and HR over the past kind of couple of weeks, just doing the fine tuning around that. And I think we are, and it will be in a position to offer opportunities for some of these new posts to the existing workforce, then we would assume that many of them would be successful in securing some of the more supervisory posts that we've referred to in this document, some of the social work assistant posts we've talked about earlier, and potential use of the council switch to arrangements where that doesn't play out. Also, there will be some element of turnover, vacancies, temporary posts in here as well that will have an impact on the number of people affected by this change.
Can I come back here? I mean, I would like an assurance that meaningful consultation will be taking place with the trade unions in regard to this. And I don't seem to be getting that. I seem to be getting that Ian's going to implement it and then maybe consult with the unions.
Well, I can assure you we have met separately with the trade union on the support. We meet with the trade union every fortnight, and care at home is very much to the forefront of that agenda. Been similar to the arrangements we've put in place elsewhere. Have appointed the committee to work we did around some of the care homes, Kirkton McWhirters, when they were decommissioned. We did sessions, as Scott's done, with the staff team. We will put in, as we will do here, put in place individual one-to-one sessions with staff members to take account of their particular circumstances, to look at the range of opportunities that the council may have in terms of their skill set and job grade and so forth, to make sure we get a good outcome for them as we possibly can. So I think we've got a reasonable track record in terms of working with the trade unions, working with the workforce in terms of such change programmes, trying to get good outcomes all round. So a good outcome in terms of interest of the service. And I would reinforce the fact that this is about making sure that we support our workforce effectively over 7 days a week when they're working, that we are targeting the care at home resource effectively and efficiently, so we're meeting people's care needs safely, and we're making best use of the financial resource available to us. So this we see as a step forward for care at home, but we do need to protect the existing workforce over the course of that change process, and we're committed to doing so.
Can I just add, Councillor, also that we have given a commitment to the trade unions that we would consult fully with them throughout the whole process. They will be heavily involved in the development of the implementation plan with us, and we will meet the trade unions on a recurring basis throughout this whole process, as we have been previously.
Chair, I see one of my colleagues is wanting to come in before I raise my other point, if it's okay with you. You're muted, Chair.
John, you're muted.
Oh dear. David, it was you.
Yeah, thanks. My first point was along the same, excuse me, as Alec. I've got concerns of what I'm hearing there, in so much, and this is part of the presentation, that we appear to be talking to the trade unions and the staff, but we've got no conclusion to that. And it's one thing talking, and it's another thing getting an actual agreed conclusion. And probably the follow-on from that is what are the consequences of not accepting this report today, but hanging back till we get agreement with the staff and the trade unions. The other point I'd like to make would be that we've heard the positive side of this from the council's point of view of staffing and scheduling, etc. as councillors, we see the other side of that, and I would like to, if Ian can allude to the downside, or if there is any, or the issues that we're likely to see from the service users. From the point of view, is there going to be any issues that we'll get come knocking at our door, that individual will maybe see a reduction in their service, or not the same kind of service getting delivered to them? Thanks.
Thanks, David.
Okay, so in terms of that set of questions, so the discussions with the trade unions and the staff, I don't think there's any opposition in terms of the thinking. I think people are supportive of what we're trying to do here in terms of putting in place a more robust, 7-day-a-week infrastructure to support the service delivery. The trade unions' concerns are primarily around the impact on the staff affected. So clearly, will people have a job? Yes, they'll have a job. Will there be some ring fencing of the new jobs? Yes, we'll do that. And will the council's usual safeguards for the workforce be in play? And yes, that answer. So we'll do all we can do to work with the trade unions to get good outcomes for the staff who are impacted. I mean, as you see from the schedule in 7.1, there's a number of posts that are similar in grade to the existing kind of coordinators. A couple of team leader posts. There's 16 social work assistant posts, which are similar in grading as well, and cover some of the work that the coordinators already do. So we're confident that we will get good outcomes for the staff impacted. I mean, the consequences of not agreeing to the support would mean that we'd be continuing to run with a suboptimal support system. We would have a negative impact on the rollout of the new kind of scheduling system, and we maintain the risk that the care inspector will find weaknesses in our service delivery as a consequence. So I would urge you to kind of look on this report favourably as progress, as a step in the right direction that meets a number of the issues that are emergent and current within the care at home infrastructure. I can only see this impacting on service users positively, because what the total mobile system and the infrastructure around it is designed to do is to make sure we're delivering consistency of care, that we're picking up on any issues promptly. So any missed episodes of care is being delayed. We've got staff who will be they'll be brought to the fore through the IT system. They can go onto that straight away and manage that more effectively. We've already seen more efficiencies in terms of reduction in overtime costs and stuff from the limited rollout we've had so far. So this is intended to improve the service, to improve the benefit to service users at the end of the day, and to support our workforce better. So that's the purpose of proposing this change in the structure, to deliver a better and safer service all around.
Thanks, Ian. I'll bring in Robert.
Yes, thanks very much, Chair. Just a very quick question, which is the changeover of the out-of-hours stuff from the emergency social work service to the care at home service. Now, I can see the reasons for that with the 7-day-a-week thing and all that. Are there downsides to that, and are we able to overcome the kind of obvious links that there will need to be between emergency service social work service requirements and organising the care at home stuff?
I don't think that there's any downsides to this at all. I mean, during the day, we've got like 60 people managing care at home. Come the evening, come the weekend, we've got 3 in the emergency social work service. So the emergency social work service will be very pleased to see this report going through, because it will allow them to concentrate on things like adult protection, mental health, child protection, and care at home will consume its own smoke, as it were, around the events of the day, the events of the evening, over 7 to 8 days a week. Clearly, any issues around protection, which would still be a link, so it's very similar to during the day. If a carer has an adult protection concern out of hours, that will be pushed through to the emergency social work service to respond to that. But what the emergency social work service won't be doing is trying to find carers. When the carer phones in to say, I'm not feeling very well today, I can't make my shift, I won't have the emergency social work service trying to reschedule that. I'll have a team of people who are steeped in care at home doing that work over 7 days a week. So this will be a great improvement in terms of our support and cover in the round.
Thanks, Ian.
Okay, we'll bring in Maureen Devlin.
Right, thanks, Chair. It's just, it's come back onto the union situation, the lack of consultation. You've said that you've already been speaking to them for a number of months, and you haven't come up with an agreed plan of approach. That they're approaching us after the paper's out, and you're still consulting. I find I've got alarm bells ringing with regard to that aspect of it all. What did the union say during the consultation? Did they express views or concerns? Can somebody ask?
Scott, you want to pick up, because you've been closest to the discussions with the trade unions?
Yeah, I certainly can. Councillor Devlin, we've had ongoing discussions with the trade unions for a number of months, which have outlined the kind of general vision. And obviously, over recent weeks, there's been much more detail applied to that. I think from my interpretation of the trade union's position around this would be that they can see the rationale and see the benefits of what we're trying to achieve, but they have understandable concerns around ensuring that their members are protected. So I think that's obviously the bit which we need to ensure as part of that wider implementation plan, that we're having collective and individual discussions with people. We're talking about their individual circumstances, and we're looking at what options are available for people and take them through a kind of process. And we've given a very clear commitment to the trade unions that would very much be in place. So we'll continue to negotiate and we'll continue to consult and look to try and see if we can get the best outcomes as we possibly can for people.
Okay, Maureen, Catherine.
Thanks, Chair. No, I'm with Maureen, Davy and Alan on this. It worries me that the trade unions have come to us because they don't usually come to us with trivial matters, and we are in partnership with the unions, and after all, our best asset is our staff. So if there's concerns there, I would like to see us possibly deferring this paper, say to the next Social Work Committee, to give you time to have those meaningful discussions and consultations with the unions so that they've got a full understanding of how you're going to progress this report. I just feel that we might be rushing it, and I'm not comfortable with that. Thanks.
Okay, Catherine. Mary? Mary Donnelly?
Yeah, I'm coming in. Is there any way, I'm hearing what's been said, and I was going back to 2.1, what is this paper asking us to do? Is there any way that we could have an addendum on here that takes in the fears that people are echoing? Because I'm not hearing the officers saying that there's a problem with the trade unions and the negotiations. So is there a wee addendum we can put in here to show that we are consulting and taking their views into consideration going forward, so that we can pass this paper today?
My comment would be that we are consulting. We have had extensive discussions with the trade unions over a number of months in terms of the vision of where we want to take the service and some of the issues. Scott's met with the trade union on this particular paper, and we've worked with our HR colleagues in terms of trying to provide assurances around ring fencing jobs, looking at people's number of hours of weekly where they work, using preservation of salary, switch to and so forth to protect the interests of the existing workforce. We have talked to the individuals directly affected. This is not a paper that's going to be implemented tomorrow sort of thing, though that would be staged over a number of months, following more detailed ongoing discussions with trade unions and individual staff members, as I alluded to before, to make sure we get the right outcomes for individual people. So, this obviously is featuring things like a move to people working more of a shift pattern or working weekends, where they maybe don't do that at the moment, and that might be problematic for some individuals. So we need to work with them in terms of how we find a solution that best meets their kind of work-life balance, and we're very much committed to doing that going forward. I would point us to the 1,000 care at home staff who require support in terms of their work day to day. So this weekend they will have 3 staff working on a shift in emergency social work services providing that support, whereas during the week they've got 60 staff. So a delay in this report will allow that really not particularly satisfactory situation to continue for a longer period of time.
Okay, I'm going to bring in Liam just now.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. It's just to put a bit of background about the length of negotiations that have taken place with the trade unions with regards to this, because there was a report that was taken to committee in March 2020, which was highlighting about the project team that was being initiated to launch this. And we had full consultation with the trade unions and the staff group at that point. So that was accepted in March 2020, and that was based on a pilot that we were doing between November and January 2020. So as well as the consultation that's taken place about the change in direction and the change in the work practice, that was going back as much as 18 months that we've been having those discussions. We also, in terms of launching this, and Scott will be able to give more details, we've done a pilot in certain areas as well. So the trade unions and members were actually part of the pilot and they were aware of it. Now, and probably reiterating Ian's point, there's no opposition to actually the direction of travel about what this gives us in terms of a better model of delivery. Where there's probably anxiety around about it is that it's the protection of those whose jobs may be at risk within that, but we do have the 3-year protection through HR, and it's obviously how we support people to manage quite a significant change. But my understanding is, and having had a discussion with the trade union about this paper in particular, they don't have any issue with the direction of travel. What they're wanting is assurance that their members will not be disadvantaged within that. But just to reiterate, these consultations and discussions have been taking place since November 19, and it's been ongoing.
Thanks, Liam. Graham, sorry, I missed you there.
Sorry, just the button again. No, I think Liam's really just said what I was going to say here, and also Mary Donnelly. I actually like this report. I think this report, if we're going to modernise the service, we're going to have to make some significant changes. And the Council have chosen Total Mobile, another computer system I'm very, very familiar with, another world-class system. It's the right decision the Council have made. And I think these changes are ultimately going to improve the process and improve ultimately the care to our service users, our constituents. So I absolutely welcome this work. I don't want to see this delayed. And I do want to reiterate, because I was involved in part of this. I know that Liam and the team have engaged. They've consulted the entire way through this project. As elected members, we were all invited to many of these sessions. I know I attended one with Richard Nelson and a number of the other members in Lark Hall. I'm trying to think when it was. It was before the pandemic. So that's more than 15 or 16 months ago. So I believe the council have been negotiating, have been working with elected members, with the unions, with the staff in social work. And I absolutely welcome this report. And I think we need this if we are going to modernise this service, which I'm 100% behind.
Right. Thanks very much, Graham. I'm going to go back to Alan, because I sort of suspect that you're wanting to put an amendment or a deferral proposal on it, Alan. So if you do...
Right, Chair. I have another point to raise, but to come back on this, I'm quite concerned, and I listened to Ian saying my thinking of the trade union, and Scott says in my interpretation of the trade union. This is a tripart arrangement between the council, the trade unions and the carers, and we all want a better service and safe service for our service users. All we are asking is that we have meaningful consultation with the union, come back and say, right, we're happy with that, because they have got concerns over their jobs of their members. And that's all we're asking, that they guarantee that there will be meaningful consultation with the trade unions to get an outcome that's desired by all.
Yeah, so I think what we're trying to reinforce is that there is meaningful consultation ongoing with the trade union. We've got good relationships with the trade union. We meet them on a very regular basis. We've been working with them on this particular report. They've been urging us to bring this report to a conclusion and bring it to committee to deal with uncertainty amongst their membership. I think what we're also trying to say here is we'll continue that kind of consultation process. agreeing the report today isn't the end of that journey. We do need to understand for each individual member of staff who's impacted by this change. We need to work with them in terms of getting a good outcome. This is about keeping experienced staff in the workforce and getting as best an outcome for them as we can do as an individual. But keeping in sight, this is about modernising the service, improving the service, keeping the service safe for the service users at the end of the day. And some of these changes as a price we pay for modernising the service. We have to disrupt some elements of the service to get ourselves to a better place. But along the way, we are as concerned as a trade union to make sure that our workforce are treated well and that we get a good outcome for them at the end of the day.
Ian, thanks very much. Now, I get a sort of hint that there might be a possibility, a proposal to defer. If there is a proposal, can I have a proposer and a seconder? If not, can we agree the report?
Chair, I would like to propose that we do defer this report until we have proof, meaningful consultation with the trade unions.
Okay.
Ian says
I'll second it.
Right. So Maureen seconded it. Tracy, can we go to a vote, please?
Yeah, Councillor Bradley, can I just confirm before we start that you're proposing the recommendations as... I'm
proposing the recommendations, and Maureen?
And I'll second it, Tracy.
Okay, thank you. Okay, I'm just going to go through the members and ask them if they're voting for the motion, which is Councillor Bradley's proposal that the recommendations be accepted, and the amendment, which is Councillor Faulkner's proposal that the report be deferred until there's more meaningful consultation with the trade unions. Councillor Bradley?
Motion.
Councillor Brogan?
Amendment.
Councillor Brown?
Motion.
Councillor Buchanan? Don't see Councillor Buchanan in the meeting. I'll come back and see if he's still in. Councillor Calicut?
Motion.
Councillor Campbell?
Motion.
Councillor Carmichael?
Amendment.
Councillor Chalmers?
Motion.
Councillor Curry?
Amendment.
Councillor Devlin?
Amendment, Tracy.
Councillor Donnelly?
Sorry, motion.
Councillor Faulkner?
Amendment.
Councillor Holford?
Motion.
Councillor Horton?
Motion.
Councillor Loudon?
Motion.
Councillor Ward's not in the meeting. Councillor MacDonald?
Motion.
Councillor McClymont?
Amendment.
Councillor McGavigan?
Motion.
Councillor McGuigan?
Motion.
Councillor Nealon?
Motion.
Councillor Delson's not in the meeting. Councillor Nugent?
Motion.
Councillor Ross is not in the meeting. Councillor Walker?
Amendment.
And Councillor Watson?
Amendment.
Amendment. And can I go back to check Councillor Buchanan is in the meeting? No, it looks like Councillor Buchanan's left the meeting. I'll just tally it up. I've got 8 votes for the motion. 14 votes for the motion and 8 votes for the amendment, so the motion is carried.
Okay, thanks. Thanks, Tracy. We'll move on to items for noting. Item 16 is the transformation in services.
I had a second point to bring in that's nothing to do with that. The second bring in, no to do with that, staffing. I did say I had 2 points to raise.
But we've passed the paper, Alan, so it's
remiss for no letting me in when my hand was up. Well, I did say at the start I had 2 questions. The first one was in regard to the restaffing. The second one is in regard to an article on page 122, and I think it's only right and proper that you allow me to speak on it, since I did indicate that I had 2 questions. Who your favours, Chair?
Carry on, Alan.
Thanks very much, Chair. On page 122, 3.5, with communication, the new system provides home carers with access to much better information and service users. I've raised concerns about this issue over the last year with both Ian and Scott. And I think back to last week's meeting when Ian said to me quite clearly that the new service, contrary to what I may have heard, the new totally mobile service is proving very successful. I don't know whether Ian was involved on Sunday when the whole system crashed and with a situation of carers all over South Lanarkshire couldn't access who to go to visit, the today by memory, so much so that the Hamilton team put a letter thanking their staff for me. So the totally mobile service crashed. But my main issue with the totally mobile service is the fact that we're not recording care diaries in the service user's home. We're not also recording my charge. So anybody going in there, whether it be a social worker, a district nurse, a doctor, or the blue light services, don't know what's happened with that person during that day. They also don't know if they've had their medication. Now, previously I was told that there would be an app available for each person which could be accessed by their carer who might not be resident. There is no mention of an app for that. And I think this lack of information, especially with service users who live alone, it's going to lead to some maybe serious, hopefully no, but I'd just like to see that. And the other thing, and I know Scott's talked about the Hamilton Health and Care Forum. I raised this issue at the Hamilton Health and Social Care Forum in the last couple of months, and I was surprised when carers online, and there were social work senior staff there, says they had never been consulted. I also asked the Lanarkshire carers if they had been consulted about this change of service, as under the Scotland Act, any change of service provision involves consultation. Now, neither the Lanarkshire Carers Centre or the carers that were at these meetings had been consulted in this change. So I'd just like to know who we did consult prior to making this change of not leaving care diaries or MRA charts.
I'll take that offline just now, Alan, if you don't mind, and perhaps Ian can give you the detailed explanation. Okay, we'll move on to item 16, Transformation and Service Improvement Programme, pages 131 to 140, and Ian will take us through this.
Okay, thanks, Chair. I feel we've probably covered quite a lot of this report over the course of the morning already. So this is a report we provide to give a kind of overview of all the kind of change programmes and trying to make some of the connections, because they all kind of impact on another. So I'll not kind of dwell on it in too much detail. So the Care and Support Service Review we've already covered. Care facilities, just kind of provide update. We're just maintaining the progress on the Blantyre development. That's progressing pretty well. I think the buildings are going up fast now. The various work streams to support the new model are progressing well. Also, we've had some engagement with frontline staff about identifying people to move into the first set of tenancies, which will start coming on stream from October. And there's a few paragraphs in the report around mental health, mostly from the NHS side of the partnership. Most of the mental health is hosted by the North Partnership still, but clearly it has an impact on the South. So there's a few paragraphs for the committee's information in terms of monies to support kind of COVID remobilisation and developments around mental health primary care, for example. There's a wee update on the service review and the phase reopening of day centres, and we've covered much of the care at home model as well, and the Swiss replacement. So hopefully the report's helpful in terms of connecting the different elements of review activity into a kind of overview of how that all kind of links together. I'm happy to pick up any questions and stuff we've not kind of covered already.
Thanks, Ian. Any questions for Ian? Robert?
Yes, thanks very much. Just a very quick one. That we put in place the business of the lunchtime service for people at home under the community care arrangement, which was stood down in April. I thought we were going to have a further look at this, because it was one of the things that actually seemed to be quite a successful experiment and in some ways in place of the relevant community visit, as it were. And I wondered if there was any further thinking on that one. It seems to have kind of gone into the dust of forgotten projects a little bit.
Yeah, so we I suppose had two goes at setting up the community meal service using displaced resources from other parts of the council. So we used them at the kind of the peaks of the waves of COVID to supplement the existing care at home service, which was under pressure with staff shielding and absences and so forth. So it was reasonably successful in providing some meal input for some service users at a relatively small scale. So we did have a bit of a look at that after the event, just to see the benefits accrued and looking at the costs of delivering the model. And this was the view of the operational service team, was because of the nature of complexity of most of our service users, you were still having to put in visits over and above the meals provision. So we didn't really feel it was at this stage a kind of cost-effective model that we wanted to pursue in terms of an alternative model of delivery. So we have had a look at it and didn't feel it was really a business case to take it any further forward at this stage.
Thanks, Ian. Alan, I see you get your hand up. Is that for the previous one?
It's for a question, Chair. Thank you.
Okay.
Just one question. I've asked Ian this before, just get an answer regarding the Blantyre Centre, the new technology homes. Have we come to an agreement with housing as regards who's paying for the broadband in the homes? I.e., if the new tenant decides they don't want to pay the $29.99 minimum charge for broadband to activate the new technology, what will happen?
Yeah, I think that was a relevant and interesting point you raised at a previous meeting, which we're following up on to try and make sure we consider all contingencies. I think there's not one answer fits all, but ultimately we'll make sure that the broadband is in the house for folks one way or another. I would say that many people these days have services bundled together, their television, their phone, their broadband, for example, and I'm sure many service users will choose that. But ultimately, the whole intention of things like SDS is we can use some of those funds to support anything that will enable care to be delivered effectively, which might include broadband connections. So that was an interesting point we're following up, and we'll have a resolution to that before people move into the tenancies, and it'll probably be sorted out on a case-by-case basis.
Thanks, Chair.
Okay. Thanks, everyone. No further questions. Can we agree the recommendations at 2?
Agreed.
Thank you. Item 17, Autism Resource Coordination Hub, Arch, pages 141 to 160. It's Liam to give this report, but I see Ramon's here as well.
Yeah, Chair, just to give an introduction, Ramon Hutchison's the coordinator for the arts projects. We thought it would be appropriate that Ramon talks to the report and gives an update on the progress of arts, but also the response during the pandemic for the committee. So I'll pass over to Ramon to talk to the report. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. Thank you, Liam. I hope I can make some sense. Over the last year, it's been kind of fairly hectic, and what I can say is that the Arch has continued to work from the 27th of March 2020. We immediately recognised that the need for our autism community to have supports to be maintained. So we got a subscription actually to one of the online platforms, and have since then continued to offer online support, which is, I think, has been described by some as a lifeline. So it's been, the last year has been very much a continuation of the iterative process that Arch has gone through for the past 5 years. We have basically seen in the last month an addition to our mailing list of 31 people, and that's the kind of momentum that we've been gathering. During the lockdown, we've also seen an unprecedented amount of crisis intervention for autistic families and autistic individuals across the lifespan, who are in need of basically emotional support, but also to help navigate the lockdown experience and the absence of other available services. So we've very much stepped into a kind of unanticipated territory. We were obviously our initial vision was as a support, information and guidance service, but we have become very much a crisis intervention service, and I think that has proved itself many times over. I can only say anecdotally, I don't have the statistics, but we know that there have been many families who have contacted us who would have otherwise have been going to emergency social work or the locality teams. So during the lockdown, we've kind of basically continued to progress in both a strategic and an operational manner. I've mentioned the helpline that we continue to staff. That's been on a daily basis, but also at a local and national level, we've kind of initiated a campaign that we call Think National, Act Local. And that's because we want to make sure that the South Lanarkshire autism voice is heard and acknowledged. And to that end, what we've been doing is developing various things, such as the My Autism Profile tool, which I think has been universally accepted in the Health and Social Care Partnership as a very valuable addition for primarily parent carers and autistic people themselves. It's not been designed for professionals. It's been designed for users and carers to actually have a basis to then go and talk in a meaningful way about how their child or young person or adult's autistic profile impacts them, and to then advocate for meaningful, targeted services and supports. So I think that's been a valuable addition. And in fact, the effect of that at a national level is that we were invited on to a national pilot by Dr. Tom Kirkwood and Bill Coley, who is the director of the National National ADHD Partnership charity, and that's called the Development Wellbeing Assessment Pilot, which potentially could have implications in terms of practice nationally. Somebody, I think it was Cormac Russell, the guru of the ABCD model, said if we want to change our practice, we have to practice our change, and this is very much an effort to change practice and make it much more specific. And the reason that I'm saying that is that the Autism Profile tool is perhaps a very much more user-friendly kind of diluted version of the bigger and more kind of detailed DOBA, the Development Wellbeing Assessment tool. But I'm very proud that we are progressing with that. We've also had an unprecedented amount of national developments in relation to autism, which I'm sure, as the councillors already know, we've got a commitment by the new government to implement Autism, Learning Disability and Neurodiversity Commissioner's Office, backed by legislation which will be following on from the mental health legislation. We've also had a huge amount of change in terms of the end of the Scottish Strategy for Autism coming upon us, and a new document for the next 2 years called Towards Transformation, which I've included in your appendices. And obviously we've made contributions to those documents through Blake Stevenson, who is the Scottish Government commissioned research service. And I think I've also appended a kind of graphic, a very detailed graphic of our feedback to Blake Stevenson. So that's about involving our community. It's about making sure that our community is at the very heart of everything we do. And as we said in our local autism action plan 2018 to 23, that our intention is to maintain and strengthen existing partnerships by collaborating through multi-agency approaches. And I think that we have evidenced that that's what we've done. We essentially are brokering connections between agencies in terms of the Christie Commission recommendations that could not possibly be achieved in any other way, in my opinion. I think that we have shown ourselves to be a unique undertaking, and endorsed no less by Professor Jason Leach, who, if you go into his Twitter page, kind of endorsed our model and said he thought that it was something, a template that could realistically be used in the rest of Scotland. So that was an endorsement that I was particularly proud of. In terms of other things, I mean, obviously we have raised the profile autism, I think, hugely within the authority, between all the agencies, within all colleagues, and we have been approached continuously by, for example, the ambulance service, Police Scotland, student nurses, student health visitors, student teachers, asking us for autism awareness sessions, which obviously we have continued to provide throughout lockdown digitally. We have also proudly flown the autism awareness flag, the autism pride flag during Autism Awareness Week in April for a week outside headquarters, and in 2 weeks' time on the 18th of July we'll be once again proudly flying the autism pride flag for Autism Pride Day. So it's been a very, very long and arduous year for us all, but particularly I just want to say on behalf of the autism community that it's been particularly so for autistic children, young people and adults. And lastly, just to kind of say that, we're obviously making an impact with other colleagues and other resources. Just yesterday, we had, for the first one in Scotland, I may add, a housing focus group with autistic people and parent carers to actually see if we could have an impact on South Lanarkshire's housing policy. And so there are things happening all the time that are, I suppose, in some respects feel exponential, feels as though we're spinning a lot of plates, but I think it's all beginning to come together. And I'm particularly proud that in the Towards Transformation document, Action 19, the Scottish Government actually quoted the ABCD model, the asset-based community development model, and said that they want to explore more ABCD models to create better outcomes. So I think that we perhaps have had a small influence in that via the Petitions Committee and various other national forums that we've made a contribution to. So that's as much as I want to say, and I'm obviously glad to take any questions, Chair.
Thanks very much, Ramon. Your enthusiasm shines out, and I'd just like to commend you for all your efforts and your achievements in getting Arch to be a beacon of light for the whole of Scotland. Thank you very much. If there's no questions, can we agree the recommendations too?
Agreed.
We'll move on to item 18, which is a notification of contracts awarded from October 1, 2020 to March 2021.
I'll pick this one up, Chair. So this is a sort of retrospective reporting on a number of contracts awarded around social care. So I'll briefly refer to them. It's in Appendix 1. So the main one with a rather large sum of money attached to it is the supported living contract, which runs for 15 years, and there's a range of providers identified there. We touched on some of this in an earlier report in terms of the array of services supporting people with learning difficulties and mental health. So this is the group I referred to. There's another kind of cohort of care at home providers who've negotiated contracts with providers with additional capacity over the past year or so. That's been helpful in terms of maintaining access to services and flow of patients at hospital and avoid delayed discharge. There's another group of services in here which are around COVID response, around justice, and also some services around care home block contracts that we've used to support activity over the past year or so. So that's a kind of quick through the contracts. I'm happy to pick up any questions that folks may have.
Thanks, Ian. Any questions for Ian? No questions. Can we agree the recommendations at 2?
Agreed.
Agreed. No further business. So just thank you all for your participation and take care. And I hope you managed to get a wee holiday, even if it's just down the water. See you later. Bye-bye.